Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I'm Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Leah Lowe, who serves as professor of theater and director of the Curb Center for Art, Enterprise, and Public Policy at Vanderbilt University. Leah, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, I'm so excited to have you on the show. I've been able to know about and see your work for years. I've been able to be at Vanderbilt and see some of the work of the Curb Center, firsthand, and it really is extraordinary. But I thought what we kind of try and focus on here for this show and this episode is kind of this connection and or ability for the arts to inform and or to be a catalyst for social action, social impact, and in particular theater and how that might relate to environmental issues. And there are some specific projects that you are working on that I think our audience would love to know about. So wondering if you could kind of share about these plays that you're working on and how they relate to environmental impact.
Sure. Well, I would start by just saying here at the Curb Center and in my work as an artist more generally, I really think of the arts as being a really important avenue for inquiry into the world around us, right? Just as scholars are reading books, doing research, discovering about the world, so are artists, right? And I think the value of arts in that sort of inquiry mode is that art speaks to the whole person, right? So I think arts are a way of addressing everyone, and not just their brains, but also their hearts, their personalities, the whole being. We are working on the project that you mentioned, which I'm super excited about. It's part of a larger initiative that we're calling the Eco-Grief Initiative. Eco-grief is a term that I had never heard of until a couple of years ago, but it's a term that a lot of environmental humanists are using to describe the really complex set of emotions that we feel when we consider the climate crisis that we're in and that will be continuing to develop in the years to come. And one of the things I think is so interesting about the term is so many times in conversations, I've said it to someone and they've not heard the term before, but they instantly recognize it, right? This is something that we are all processing. So I became really interested in thinking, because I am a humanist and I am an artist, how do I participate in discussions that are culture-wide about climate change, right? That to me, that feels urgent, it feels necessary, and it feels vital, right? So I started talking to some playwrights, and here at the Curb Center, in conjunction with Vanderbilt's program for communication and science and technology and with Vanderbilt's theater department, we've launched this Eco-Grief Initiative, and we sent out a call for playwrights to submit materials about how they might address eco-grief, right? I thought we would maybe have, I don't know, 70, 80 submissions. That's what I'm thinking. We had 276. So this is clearly a topic that really touched a nerve, right? And through a long, we read a lot of plays. I had a wonderful committee helping me, but we were able to sift through just, really great submissions and find 4 playwrights. Kristen is Daszak out of Chicago, Gina Femia from New York, James Sanchez in New York, and Reynaldo Pinella from New York, who are in the process of creating short plays that we will produce in the theater department at Vanderbilt using sustainable materials and methods, right? And I think it's a great project. We'll be doing some programming around that as well with an art exhibit here at the Curb Center. Um, but one of the things I love about this project is we really wanted it to speak to young people today. So in the process of creating these plays, the playwrights are actually meeting with Vanderbilt students via Zoom to kind of try out some ideas, to ask some questions of what does this feel like from an 18 to 22-year-old perspective, right? What are you concerned about? What are you noticing? So I'm hopeful that through this project, we're going to be creating some pieces that have some urgency, that address the climate crisis with the urgency that it deserves.
It's such fascinating work, and especially hearing the response shows the relevance, right, to the issues. So one question that I have is, there's got to be, and many people in our audience who are either delving into this work or really want to, and are thinking whether it may be our art making that might relate to climate change, environmental issues, or other social issues. Are there any kind of guiding best practices that you look at to say, in other words, okay, we're going to do this work, so it's a little different. In other words, we have to prescribe maybe these types of things as we look at commissioning work, or when we look at performing it, we're going to do this. Wondering if there's kind of any guideposts that you would recommend or that you found helpful in this process.
I'm so glad that you asked. Because this is, I think, maybe the third or fourth commissioning project that I've done. And, I'm in theater, so I work with commissioning plays mostly, or performance events, right? But I don't know that they really exist. But one of the things that I would certainly advise folks that I've learned through trial and error, and I do mean trial and error, that I think it's really important to really get a sense of what the artist is able to produce, right? So what I do is, once we made selections, I then had a conversation with each of the playwrights to be really clear about what the expectations would be, deadlines, and to find out from them not only initial enthusiasm, right, but also that they were prepared to be able to produce what they needed to produce by the time that they were able to do it. The other thing that I would really advise is scheduling some check-ins along the way so that you are in conversation with the artist, and the artist doesn't feel like they're just going off, on their own, untethered from the reality in which you hope to produce or exhibit this work, right? But that they are a part of your community, right?
Okay.
That's who their audience is going to be, right? That's one of the reasons that we scheduled these check-ins with students, right? We'll also be doing developmental readings of the plays, which is a pretty typical process in new play development. So we'll have an initial reading that will be helpful for all of us, and certainly helpful there. It's helpful for the playwrights to be able to actually hear their plays out loud, right? It's very, very helpful for producers to get a sense of, okay, this is the world we're working on. This is the world that this playwright is trying to create. So that way, you're getting somewhere that's expected, that doesn't take you far afield. But more than anything else, I think, Erin, I would really say you want the artists that you're working with to feel invited in, right? To feel like they are of consequence to the community.
And I love that kind of, kind of encapsulating them into your community and making sure they feel that during this creation process that takes place. We all too often hear of examples where commissioning and the artist was kind of there, and then the commission gets delivered, and sometimes, unfortunately, there's a disconnect between
Yeah.
was delivered and how it will actually reach audiences. So that's such a great process, and I think many in our audience will be able to gain and benefit from that. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time, but I always like to ask of all my guests, and I'm so curious, especially as it relates to this type of work and commissioning processes, that there's times where things are going great, everything is working, everything's wonderful, but then there's other days where things don't, and there's challenges. And just wondering, and a leader, and especially in your administrative capacity, are there any mechanisms you use as a leader to get past the tough days, the challenges, those obstacles that come up?
Well, I always think that having a sense of humor is key, right? I mean, having a sense of humor and good communication skills where, you hit a rough patch where people don't feel blamed, right? But they feel motivated to help, to help get through that rough patch, right? And I think having a sense of humor can be huge in that. I think realizing we're all in it together when you're doing something like this, like it's not one person carrying the load, it's everybody carrying the load, right? And good communication skills.
Love that, especially the communication. These days, it seems like whatever we can do to better communicate with one another. And especially thank you for sharing this power of how we can do this art making and have that affect something as critically important as climate change. Leah Lowe, you truly are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you so much for everything you do, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.